Let's take a look at today's lesson. Today we will be performing a composition of functions. We will be able to explain the steps we need to take when performing a composition of functions. So let's take a look at today's lesson. Hey everyone, so let's take a look at our do now for today. And today we have been given two functions, our f of x function and our m of x function. And we are asked to find part A, which is a quotient, and part B, which is a sum. So I am going to make you guys pause this video and I will get back to you with my answers. So here are my two answers. Number one, or part A, we have our two functions, f function, where my input is 2x plus 1, and my m function, where the input is 2x plus 1. I've input it into the functions itself. I did my algebra, and I ended up at 8x squared minus 1 divided by 10x plus 3. For part B, we're asked to add two functions, but I do need to remember that we're doing twice the m function, so that's what I color-coded in red. I input my given input, which is 3n minus 2, into both of the functions. Again, I do my algebra, and I end up at 18n squared minus 6n minus 7. So what are we doing today? Today, what we are looking to do is how to perform a composition of functions. So what is a composition and how do we do these? Suppose we have been given two functions, my f function and my g function. There's two ways you could see these. So you could see it written as this. There's my notation, and I'm going to read how you say this. You say f composed of g of x, or you could have it something that looks like that. In that case, that little open circle is a composition. So same thing, you would say f composed of g of x. What do you do in these cases? You are going to start with the innermost function, or the function that's next to the input. So in this case, we're going to evaluate g of x first. Once we do that function, then we're going to evaluate the f of x piece. But I'm going to put in here the output of g of x. I do my algebra on g of x. I get some output. That output is my new input into my f function. So we could look at something very similar to those, but this time g composed of f of x, or again, g with that open circle composed of f of x. So in this case, we'll do the same thing. We are going to evaluate the innermost function, or the function that's next to the input. That's the first thing we do. So we're going to evaluate f of x first, then we end up evaluating g of a new input, and that new input is what we got from f of x. So let's try some of these. Let's look at example 1. For example 1, we are applying the composition of functions. We're going to perform these composition. It says if d of x is equal to x plus I and g of x is equal to 4x minus 3, find d composed of g, where my input is 3. This is my first input. So what this means is start with g of x first. So I'm going to start with that. So I'm doing g, where my input is 3. I'm going to input this input into the function. I'm going to compute. All right, so I end up with an output of 9. That output is my new input for my next piece. So now I'm taking that d function and this time inputting that 9. So once I do my first input, I get an output. That output I take to my second function. I get a new output, and that system keeps going depending on how many functions I have to work with. So let's try another one more algebraic. We have two functions, the d function and the g function. This time we're doing d composed of g of 2n. So my starting input is this 2n. I'm starting with the g function. Okay, and I get this output of 8n minus 3. That output is my new input for my next function, which is d. And I'm going to input that into my d function, giving us a final output of 8n plus 2. There's my composition. So let's try another one. For number 3, what we are doing is we're given two functions again. We have an f function and a g function, and we are doing g composed of f when my input is a plus 3. So starting input. The function I am working with first is my f function. I get an output of a plus 4. That output is now my new input for my next piece, which is g of a plus 4. I'm inputting that into my functions rule. And I end up at 2a plus 8. Let's keep going. For our next one, we have our two functions, f and g. This time you are starting with f composed of g of 2x plus 3y. So here's my starting input. I'm going to start with the g function, input that into my g function. I get an output. That output is my new input for my f function. There is nothing for us to combine in that one, so that is my final output. And the last one, so for this last one, I want you guys to try it out and let's see if we end up at the same answer. So pause the video, try it out yourself. So the final answer for number 5 should have been x to the 4th plus 8x squared plus 15. So that is it for a composition of functions. Our rule is we're taking one function, inputting the original given input, getting some output, and that output is our new input for the next function. And again, the cycle continues the more functions you have and you're dealing with. So keep learning, keep growing, and I will see you in our next video.